John Harper here. Thought I'd take a few minutes and say a few things about how I came to be involved in the diamond approach. I think it might be useful to some, maybe not to others. It's usually the case in life. I think there are basically two doorways into the diamond approach. One is from the mystical and one is from the psychological. And for years I thought I came in through the mystical doorway because I came in with a lot of mystical experience. But in fact I came in through the psychological because I left the mystical when I realized the biggest problem in my life was me, and I needed to figure out how to become a real human being. Let me give you a little background on me. I grew up in a military family with the colonel, and everything was yes sir, yes ma'am, put the toilet seat down, get your elbows off the table or get smacked with the butter knife. And in the midst of all that, I seem to have developed this Enneagram 8 personality style. So there's been a lot of confrontation in my life, not only with others but with myself. When I left home at 18 to go to college, I didn't have a clue about the world. I was going to become an engineer, came out to California, was studying, and went back to Georgia, where my mother and young sister were, and changed over to study sociology and political science. And in that period of my life, I was 19, I had this experience of awakening that challenged everything I knew about the world because I didn't know anything about the world. The world was what it was. You went to school, you were looking for a job, you were out to have fun, meet girls, make money, having a good time. And hopefully more good times than bad times. But I had this experience where there was just this triggering event, and this thick substance started descending through the top of my head, and the hair went up on the back of my neck, and goosebumps, and I was like, what the heck? And when it reached about the level of my shoulders, it felt like, welcome home. It was almost like a voice, and I was wondering where'd that come from. It kept descending, and when it reached my heart, it was like somebody had taken a piano wire and stuck it right into the center of my heart. It was just ecstatic and excruciating at the same time, and something awakened, and I didn't know what that was, so I thought I would go figure that out, find out. And so I got on the spiritual path. I spent about 15 years seeking that which had awakened. And I've thought back quite a few times about, wow, what would it have been like to have had a diamond approach teacher there? Somebody that could have helped me inquire directly into that immediate experience. The big thing is, something just woke up. Why do you have to leave yourself to go find it? Why do you have to travel the world? Where are you going? What book's going to help you find out what just awakened in you? Let's explore it. Let's find out right here, right now. But I didn't. I didn't have a diamond approach teacher. That was way before the diamond approach came into the world. So I spent the next 15 years on a spiritual path that was kind of mind-boggling to me. I was having all kinds of mystical experiences, different dimensions, out-of-the-body travel, ecstatic states, non-conceptual experiences, as we would call them now. And through it all, I continued being a jerk. I was looking for the great technique that was going to give me the wonderful life. And I could really go out and enjoy myself now and have this charismatic personality in the world, and you name it. I've been there, and myself, as probably many of you have. But I reached a point in all that, because I was reading so much from so many, that I realized that a lot of the experience I was having and that others were having was really just more ego experience. And the notion of the true self or the higher self, mostly that was just a more subtle form of ego. And it was no longer, this path was no longer reaching me in a significant way, even though I continued to have wild and exciting experiences. I wasn't changing. I was the biggest problem in my life. And my life was a mess. So I decided, the heck with this mystical, the heck with this search for God realization, as we called it in those days, or enlightenment, or whatever the heck we're calling it these days. And I decided that I just needed to figure out how to be a human being. So I left that realm, and came into the world wondering, how the heck do I figure that out? Where does one start? Because really, I thought psychology and therapy and all that stuff was just a bunch of crap. And obviously a clear indicator that I needed a lot of it. But so I went back and started reading Rumi and Idris Shah and Sufi this and Buddhist that. And after a couple of years, I walked into a bookstore with a friend of mine, and there was Diamond Heart 1, Elements of the Real in Man. And I just had to have that book. You know how that is. You see a book and you just have to have it. You don't know why, but it's just calling to you. So I read that book, and it was like this guy, Almaz, was describing my experience to me. And he was giving me the words to articulate better to others things that I had been trying to articulate to them, but just didn't have the framework to put it forth in. So I read the books for a couple of years, and I was working my way through the Pearl Beyond Price. Went to sleep one night, became very acutely awake and aware. Even though my body was still in the bed sleeping, my consciousness was activated and alive, and there was only boundless consciousness, vast without extension. And in this medium of consciousness, there was this huge wave moving. And as this wave moved, it was touching individual points, trillions of them, within that field of consciousness. And every point it touched exploded in ecstasy. So my experience was pretty ecstatic. And the interesting thing was, I woke up. I'd wake up and nothing was happening in the physical world. And I'd close my eyes, I'd go back into this place. I'd wake up, no, nothing really happening, go back into this place. The other interesting thing is that this wave, which was so huge, was everywhere at once. So how do you explain the movement when it's everywhere at once? And when it's touching every point within itself at the same time? You know, how do you account for how our mind interprets an experience like that? And tries to give it to us in some fashion that it can make some kind of sense out of it. Anyway, I woke up the next day and fired off a letter to the Red One office and said, these people got it, I need to figure out what they're doing, and they've got the technique I've been looking for, the Holy Grail. So I got involved in the diamond approach in the Seattle area about 30 years ago. And the first weekend we had was a riot for me, because we were working on the green, and as you know, or maybe you don't, but some of you may know, those 8 personality types are, pretty armored up. So my first introduction to the diamond approach, we're going to be talking on compassion and hurt and things like that. And after the first lecture or two, the teacher offered the space to anybody that wanted to work, and a fellow in the work by the name of Michael said, sure. And he let out a blood-curdling scream, and I went, what the heck have I gotten into? And I just sat there, and Michael worked, and the months went by, and other people worked, and it took about 1.5 to 2 years before the empathy got to me, and I got to some places in myself, and I could start the real work, So I thought it might be interesting to share some of this. Who knows what brings us to the work? Most of us think we bring ourselves to the work. But in the end, we usually find out the work brought us to the work. And what's the point of having a life, being on the planet, if one isn't expressing what's real and living an authentic life and moving forward from that point? At some point after we've been on the path a while, hopefully we'll reach a point where there's an end to the seeking, when there's a realization that there isn't a technique that's going to do it, that we can't do realization. And not only that, our motivation and the person that was seeking starts to change, and things just shift to exploring what's going on right now. And that exploration opens up everything. So if you've hung in there to this point, I thought I'd test your limit and read you a poem that I wrote from those early days in getting on the diamond approach path, which I'd like to dedicate to Irv and Carol, a couple of my teachers from those early days. This poem's called Compassion. My heart was sad, it cried and cried, an ocean of tears that never dried, they never dried. Everyone said, look inside, the healing lies deep inside. So I looked and I looked and I pried and pried, and when the answers came I couldn't hide. Nowhere to run, I couldn't hide. The truth and the pain lay side by side and lit up the places I used to hide. Nowhere to run, I couldn't hide. And those I had tried and all that I tried exposed the cancer we call pride. It seduces the soul and wounds the heart, and in all of our anguish plays a part. And my heart was sad, it cried and cried, an ocean of tears that never dried, they never dried. The root of my life seemed to be pain that sent me rocking again and again, and the sum of my life wasn't fit for the drain. And seeing it all, the tears fell like rain, yes, tears thick as rain. When the wail of my soul I could not refrain, it tore from my throat in a hellish refrain that left behind all I knew to be sane. As an adult, I was always beguiled, and never admitted this hidden child, innocent child, always reviled, and my heart was sad, it cried and cried, an ocean of tears that never dried, they never tried. Into the heart of this rabid place moved the beauty of exquisite grace. In compassionate green she was lovingly styled, and when she looked at me, mercy smiled. And the hand of God, the mother's arm, gathered me in from further harm. To sacred ground removed from harm, as the mystery worked its wondrous charm, and quieted down my demented alarm. Until all I beheld was bathed in green, and I found myself amazingly clean. And my heart was glad, it cried and cried. An ocean of tears that never dried, they've never dried. So, my hope for you is also a transformation of tears.